Welcome, everybody. This is a Hangout on Air devoted to the topic of an extended argument. And we've had a couple of Hangouts that are interactive before, but we wanted to do one that we could show to district teachers that would also include some student writing from the middle school. So today we have with us Terrence Sanders from Braemar District. You can say hi, Terrence.
Hello, everyone.
And we have Rachel Baer from the Boise State Writing Project and part of the leadership team for the College Ready Writers Program, and Casey Olson from the Montana Writing Project and also part of the leadership team for the College Ready Writers Project. And my name is Tom Fox from the National Writing Project. So we're at a place in our project where a lot of things have been started. There's daily argument writing in many classrooms, and teachers are experimenting with mini units. And so what this part is to extend those mini units into longer researched arguments. What we hope is that we will help you teachers find a place in your curriculum where you can use these arguments, either by replacing a research paper that you already have, or by showing how that going deep actually can save some time for you instead of extend more time. So the extended argument is part of year 2 goals, and including daily writing and the mini units. And we see these as accumulating for students. So like if a student does a lot of daily writing, they'll be good at the mini units. If they do mini units, they'll have the skills and practices to be able to do the extended argument. So one of the things that we started with way back in March of 2014, I think, was we had a meeting with the districts and the teachers in St. Louis, and one of the guest speakers, Rochelle Ramey, talked about focusing on the student the day after high school graduation. And like, what would that student need to know, be able to do to be a good citizen in the world? And so all of the things that we're doing in middle school and high school, what has to happen in all of those steps for that student to be able to go out in the world and read and write critically and take their place in the public arguments that are going on? So we thought we would start with a quick write, and this is like writing into the day, only it's writing into the Hangout. And invite people to think about to take some maybe 7 minutes, and what do we really want students to be able to do when they leave our classroom? What attitudes and behaviors towards the controversies would we want our students to have when they leave high school? And so what you're going to do now is just pause the video for the time it takes to write and share, and begin by getting our thoughts out on this important topic. And now that you've done that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Baer to introduce the next segment and take us into some student writing.
So we have some cool resources that we're going to build in throughout the Hangout today, and those are videos from one of Casey's students who's talking about his experience with an extended argument writing, and his kind of reflection after he'd completed it based on some of these larger questions and ideas that we're thinking about. So the first video we're going to play is Justin talking about his answer to the question, why argument? And what you'll see is that what he talks about is very much probably what you wrote about when you were thinking about what you wanted for students. So this really, we see here that Justin embodies those qualities, the things that we hope for when students leave high school. So Casey is going to go ahead and play that video.
It's important to write argument papers like this for high schoolers, I think, because well, a lot of high schoolers, they like to just, they're very one-sided on arguments and everything. So if they did this, I mean, not everybody's going to, open up their mind to things, but it could help a lot of people, you know, prepare you for college and just life, I guess, because when you get in an argument, you know, you want to be able to back it up. And, you know, after writing this, you know, your argument's useless without facts or evidence. So that was like one of the biggest things I got from it, I think.
So like I mentioned, this video and the other ones that we're going to watch were recorded after Justin had completed all of his writing and the activities leading up to it. So he didn't start with this perspective. It came out from some very deliberate planning and steps that Casey built into instruction throughout the process of working on this piece of writing. So next I'm going to pass things over to Casey, who's going to talk about how Justin got there. So what were some of the key moments in the process that helped Justin get to a place where he holds that kind of thinking about argument.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So, you know, watching that video as Justin's teacher, I'm really proud of where he ended up, and I think it relates back to that prompt that Tom started us out with, and I would bet that many of those qualities and many of those attributes that you all thought up for, you know, where would you like your students to be when they graduate high school or the day after graduation? Where would you like them to be when it comes to being informed and being a person in the world and being prepared for college and being prepared for a career? Justin embodies a lot of that for me. You know, my answers to that question, Justin is a really good example, but you know, he's a student who definitely struggled in school as well. So I really like to talk about his example in this process. You know, how did he get there? So the first thing I would have to say is that he spent time with topics. He got to talk about topics with his peers. This is a pre-write that he did, a list that he made of possible issues that he could write about for an argument piece, an extended argument piece. And he's writing down issues that he has a strong stance on, but also issues that you know, his peers might have suggested. And they got to talk about those, and they got to compare lists, and they got to compare their positions on each of these, and they found that they didn't all agree on everything. And that's an important idea to get out there with students, that, you know, we don't all agree. There isn't consensus thought on any one of these issues. So by spending time, by having conversations with these topics, students get to feel out that there isn't just my side and everybody else who's wrong. There might be as many perspectives on an issue as there are people in the room, and that's really powerful for students in the classroom. At least in my classroom, I've definitely found that to be true. Another thing that Justin definitely had time with is time with opposing sources and aligning sources. He spent time with source material. We can see this in the example in the slide that he got to read from an ecologist who said that wolves in Yellowstone National Park are actually helping the environment. And Justin comes to the argument from the perspective that wolves are hurting the environment and they're hurting wildlife. So he got to feel out and see what people who disagreed with him thought about the issue. And then later on he got to think about what people who agreed with him thought about the issue. And later he would, as we can see here in the example, he also spent time actually writing from those sources. So I'd like to show a quick video here of Justin talking about spending time with those opposing sources, just to show how important this became to him in his process and where it helped him. So here's his video.
We had a packet that told us when we were looking to get quotes, like if it did this, it was illustrating, and if it did that, it was authorizing. So then I just would read through all the things I highlighted, and if whatever was illustrating, I put I next to it so that I could go back and it was easy to get my quotes. Or if it was, I thought it was authorizing, put an A, so then it's easy to know what I was trying to do there. I started having a conversation in the margin, and it helped me in the way so that when later on in the paper, when my opinion kind of started to change, in order for the paper to work, I could look back and remind myself that, oh yeah, I was thinking this. And after I learned more, I could go back and remember what my beginning bias was.
Okay, so you know, he named some smaller moves there of actually having conversations, having you know, these talks with the text itself, filling out where he stands on the issue, and I think if we look at this example here, Justin is employing a sentence stem where he's considered that other source. He's quoting from that source, so he's showing that he's read from that opposing source, and even though he doesn't agree with it, he's treating it with respect and giving that other writer credibility, and weighing out the logic of what that opposing source had to say, and then he adds in his comments. So we have a basic "it says" and then "I say," and that's an activity that we worked on in class to help Justin be able to do that, to sort out between what the text is saying and his reaction to it. And then also Justin spent time quoting from those sources, so I'm going to play a video here. Let's see here, video clip on him talking about working with source material and actually using it in his writing. So here he goes.
I just thought it was interesting how the guy said the park's entire ecosystem changed just from the wolves going back. So, yeah, I didn't really understand that at first, but I was like, oh, this will be a good one to write down. And then I said everything in the park is supposedly back to its natural balance. I guess it made me want to find out more, like what was the park's original thing before wolves were eradicated. In-text citation, yeah, it's my first time using that. Usually when I quote, I don't include the author's name or anything. I just put the quotes and call it good. But yeah, this is my first time. This was pretty much the example I went off every time. Well, I mean, later it came natural writing the quotes and everything. So, but at first this was the example I went back to.
And I like how Justin said that as he plays around with working with this source material, he's using those those first initial steps in constructing this paragraph and its structure. He comes back to that, and he models future writing on this first practice with writing that he shows here in this paragraph. And later, what I also like, he says later it came natural. It just became the thing that I did, and he falls into a rhythm with his writing. So I see this focused practice with argument skills is something that definitely helped Justin get to where he was there with that first video about why argument is important to begin with, how it applies to the outside world, and why it isn't just something that we do at school. So this is a website I created with my students, including Justin, and the link is provided in this video. And this shows Justin's process here from beginning to end, every step that he made in constructing his argument, from the topic list here at the beginning, where he first tries to figure out what exactly is he going to write about, what's he interested in, and we move through to this final draft and this final reflection. What I see in this process as a teacher is there's a lot of steps. He's accomplishing a lot. He's doing a lot at once. And I know as a teacher that might seem daunting, like it's going to take a bunch of time. And the traditional model is the teachers assign work to students, and then they collect work from students, and that time factor is a definite pressure on teachers because they have to take all those, to their prep hour, but more likely they have to take them all home and respond to them and quote unquote grade those papers. So what Justin's process here represents is an extended argument over the same length of time, but it has spots created in it that actually save the teacher time and help Justin's writing as a result. So if we look at it from the perspective of summative assessment versus formative assessment, summative assessment is that traditional model where the teacher collects the writing and goes home and grades it, whereas formative assessment that's an assessment made in the moment where it helps the writer grow. It gives me a chance as the teacher to put my finger on the pulse of how Justin's writing is doing, how every student, each individual student, how their writing is doing. But it also helps Justin grow, the individual student grow as a result. So an example of that would be right here, opposing perspectives peer response. Here Justin's peers are giving him their responses to what he's written. That helps Justin get a reflection, and it actually saves me time because it involves his peers in the process. His peers grow because they're involved in it, and actually they're making assessments about other people's work, which then they carry back and apply to their own work. But then we double down on that process with formative assessment, and Justin actually completes a self-reflection over the peer response that he just received. So that allows Justin to process the formative assessment that he's received and grow from it and make changes to his draft. So if you were to go to this website, you would see a large change between this initial draft and the revised draft that follows that formative assessment process. One other thing that I would throw in there is that Justin and I also engaged in one-on-one conferences where he and I talked about his writing as a form of formative assessment. And that also helped him through the process. And so I have one more question, or excuse me, I have one more video here and one more question that I posed to Justin where I asked him, why is reflection important? And I'd like to play that for you now, and then we'll just do a quick prompt.
Reflection plays a huge role in the writing process. It gives you time to actually look at what's going on, and it's basically pre-revision. So then you can get that down, like what's right and what's wrong with it, on a piece of paper, and it gives you time to look over and see what is right and what is wrong, and like go into more detail on what could make it a better piece. And then you write it, you have it all written down, so then once you actually do the revise, you can look over at your reflection and remember, oh yeah, I gotta change that, and then you probably find some more things too after you start revising.
Yeah, so I think what Justin has shown us here so far is that when we slow down the process, when we as teachers slow down the process, even though that's counterintuitive because that means we're taking more time, but when we can slow down the process, we create this space for depth, and that there are ways like reflection and formative assessment that allow us to get more for the time that we spend. So we're going to take a moment to pause again and respond and reflect and write and discuss, again, maybe 5 to 7 minutes. And my questions for you are, what did you notice about what Justin said? What did you notice in his writing? What struck you about Justin's response? And how does this impact the way you're thinking about writing and argument writing in your classroom? What are the implications? So let's take 5 to 7 minutes, and we'll pause and we'll meet you back here. Okay, thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Terrence Sanders.
Hello, everyone. I am a middle school teacher, as we said, and one of the things that I realized this year and last year is that our students already argue. More than that, they want to argue, and they want to win an argument. So that made my job really easy because I get to teach them how to win. If you see below, it says breathing in, breathing out. This is a strategy that I use to help the students when reading and writing. When we breathe in, we take in the information, or we read. As you see below, it says annotation. And while reading is from a text, annotation can also be via interview or conversation. And we still find a way to use that information, so that way when we breathe out, we can structure our argument in a way that keeps our audience in mind. Go ahead and turn to the next slide, please. There are a couple student artifacts that I've included, and the first artifact looks at the teen brain. We had a couple of goals. First, make sure that it's all about the claim. In an argument, I've learned that my middle school students, if they can find a good starting point, then they can be successful throughout the entire argument. And there's a song that says it's all about that bass. Well, this one says it's all about the claim. No trouble. Going down, making it relevant. In this case, what you'll see is teen brain relevant. Keeping it simple is something else that was very effective. This particular paper has an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Again, we're keeping the audience in mind. And then last, using source information. And we started with a stem and authorization. Go ahead and turn to the next slide. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about these papers, but I invite you to take a look at the papers to see what Harris moves are used. Take a look at how they are used from the transition and how it's supporting the claim, how the evidence is supporting the claim, how the analysis of the evidence points back to the claim. Like we said before, it's all about the claim. This particular paper was for the Teen Brain Mini Unit. Now, can you go to the next slide? And then one more, please. This is a body paragraph. If you can, take a look at the middle where it says, according to Robert Epstein, and it goes on to say author of Teen Brain and a researcher in psychology, and so forth and so on. This really helped the students connect to the evidence because they felt like they could actually validate what they were saying. And not only did they write, but we shared these things out loud. So they knew that they were held accountable, large group, and so they were more motivated to be specific and purposeful when they were writing on their own. Can you go ahead to the next slide? And then a few more. This is the conclusion, and I'm not going to talk about it, but I invite you to take a look at the conclusion, how well the student argued her point throughout the entire paper. And again, the focus was the claim, while being intentional as to what we told the audience. All right, would you go to the next? This next artifact was a fear artifact. And as you can see, we have the audience in mind. Our structure was intentional, and it's still all about the claim. Now, the source information in this particular one focused on connecting the audience to the claim. Not so much using the Harris moves, using the STEM, and using authorization. Okay? Go ahead to the next. And I invite you to look at this one, and you'll see that the student is really trying to connect the audience to the claim. Go ahead. And this is the rest of that excerpt. Would you go one more slide? Now, the last artifact that you'll see, this was a choice artifact. Now, this particular project resembled Casey's project, as we saw earlier. The students chose from a list of topics that they had within themselves, and then after they made that list, they really focused on one thing that they thought was most important. From there, they made it all about the claim and the evidence connected to the claim. The analysis connected the evidence to the claim. And there's another part that I call delineation, which exemplifies the claim. This is where the students start to push back, where they mention the naysayers while supporting their claim. Can you go to this next slide, please? So what you'll notice here is, again, the student focused on the claim while arguing throughout. There was a small introduction on authorization, but it was not as specific as the first paper that hopefully you saw. Can you go to the next slide? And then a couple more. Keep going, please. Yes, all the way to the conclusion. Right. This particular slide, the students had a bigger paper where they had an intro and then body that supported the claim throughout, but it had several paragraphs and then a conclusion. If there is one thing that I would love to encourage you to keep in mind, first, the students already argue. Second, they want to win. To motivate them, to make it meaningful, like Justin said, giving students an opportunity to actually talk not only adds rigor, but it makes it a little more fun. I think that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, so now we'll go to Rachel Baer.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about putting the pieces together, and we're going back to Casey's example, but actually I really appreciated something that Terrence said about purposeful structure, because really that's what I'm going to talk about when we look at the final product for Justin's piece, and just talk a little bit about how clearly the structure and purpose are married here, and how each section is designed for a very specific purpose related to argumentation. So the first, Casey had all of his students follow a very similar structure here for this argument. So they started with their introduction, which the purpose here was for them to right off the bat acknowledge their biases, and so they explain the perspective that they're coming from, each student does, and then also set out the purpose of the piece they're about to write. So that's the first section. And then the next section moves on to a definition section, where the students really, what I see here is that they're bringing anyone who comes to their piece of writing on a level playing field and defining any terms that need definition or clarification. So then the next section, they move on to the opposing viewpoint. And I can see how it's a very deliberate move to put the opposing viewpoint first. So they're very clearly, this is really a sign of a really strong argument, is considering that opposing viewpoint, and both Casey and Terrence talked about having their students do that, and they look at what the opposing viewpoint is, and then they have an opportunity to counter and really just acknowledge that. And I know that Casey said when his students were working through this process, sometimes they would come across evidence that they could use that aligned with their viewpoint, and he would just tell them to put that in a place where they could come back to it later and really try to focus on that opposing viewpoint here, before getting to the next section, which does explore the aligning viewpoint and sources and evidence that support them. And this is where they're bringing in those other Harris moves, with extending and illustrating, and how they're using those sources very specifically with a focus on their aligning viewpoint. And then finally, the last section is the conclusion, where they really synthesize things, they bring things together, and then they name some of their final conclusions about their thinking. So they take all these different pieces and put them into a final conclusion. And so I think it's really interesting to think about all the steps along the way that lead up to this, and then how this particular structure is clearly focused on argument and making sure that they include all of the steps that they've gone through in their instruction. So I'm going to go ahead and hand things back to Casey, who's going to talk just a little bit more about this extended research argument research, and then how the different pieces of the College Ready Writers program fit into this.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. So again, there is that website again, so that you can see this process in action for Justin's process. I really think that if we go back to that traditional model of writing, where we're used to structure with, say, 5-paragraph essays, and I like how Rachel said that this is structured with a purpose, that the purpose is very evident in the structure, in how we want students to consider the opposing side. We don't necessarily need them to change their mind, but we need them to be open to what opposing sides are saying so that they're not going into an argument with their hands over their ears. So also then thinking about the traditional model with that traditional, the longer extended research paper that many classrooms still use. All we need is just a little shift in projects that we already have, if we're using that research project model, to turn that into extended research. And there are resources available at the website there to see that. I think what it goes back to, though, is this backward design idea, thinking back to what we want for our students when they graduate. Obviously, if we think back, in the linear line of grade levels, there are things going on in Terrence's middle school classroom that support that student when they graduate from high school 5, 6 years down the road, and even beyond. So through use of daily argument techniques and having students have conversations, having students talk about what they're reading, breathing in, breathing out. I like that, what Terrence had to share there. Those little daily argument experiences feed into larger mini units, which then feed into extended research papers. With the daily argument, they're thinking about argument daily, and they're realizing that there's a pattern to issues and concepts about dealing with issues that can be employed. And the more they work with those, the better they get with them. And it develops a culture of argument in our classroom. As they move into units that are a little more focused, they pick up argument skills and ways of interacting with text, and they develop critical literacy skills, and that voice emerges for each student. And I heard that in Terrence's classroom as well. But where we're headed is this idea of, we want our students to be public intellectuals. We want them to experience substantial writing achievement. We want them to be ready for what lies beyond high school, both with college and with a job. And we also want them to be capable of research and sustained research. But as we get deeper into that process, we start to touch on some of those deeper things that help our communities, where we have citizens who are critically literate and are aware and discerning about information that they interact with. They're considerate of multiple perspectives around an issue. And there are both very small and very large examples that fit our communities where that would be beneficial. And eventually we move on to advocacy and agencies. But I think this slide particularly shows what we can accomplish if we create that space for depth, because the depth increases the closer we get to those intended student outcomes. And as Terrence showed very skillfully, this can happen very early on. Middle school teachers and middle school students are contributing to this process for these students, as they graduate and become those young adults post high school. So I think if we go back to that beginning question, what do we want for our students when they leave high school? I think we can answer that question with another question if we look at it from, how do we get there if we don't offer them opportunities for extended argument? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
So we're going to wrap things up with just one more bit of writing. So we'll have you pause the video once again for about 5 to 7 minutes to reflect and write and discuss these questions. How does it come together? What strategies can we put in place to prepare students to do this kind of work? So if you're thinking about, whatever the age of your students, how can you get started with having them do this kind of extended writing? So go ahead and pause and then come back in about 5 to 7 minutes. All right, so that concludes our Hangout on Air on extended argument writing. Thank you all for watching, and we really appreciate you thinking about these ways to move to this next step in the work in the College Ready Writers Program.
Thank you, everyone.
Remind you that the video and the PowerPoint are going to be posted on the webpage, so you can go back to, or you go over to the PowerPoint and take a look at Terrence's writing and the writing that Casey has put together and showed. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and thank you all for contributing.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.